Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your own online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. Shopify.com/promo.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. Stuart, we had a week off last week, but you were still working flat out, though, in France, I think. Tell us where you were and what you were reporting on.
Yeah, I was swanning around in Cannes, which is a good phrase to be able to say. But yeah, I went to the Cannes Lions, which is the big advertising and marketing sort of festival conference shebang. Which is kind of where pretty much all the big advertising agencies, but also any brand that kind of does advertising. So Spotify have a big presence there, YouTube, Amazon Music, all the internet, Facebook, Meta, all those people. So I was kind of there, just kind of gauging what the advertising industry is talking about. But if any idea of it being kind of a difference to usual, kind of was scotch, because what they're talking about is AI. They're all sort of... It's the big topic is like, what does creative generative AI mean for advertising? What does it mean for brands, people creating stuff? Because this whole event is about people there's a big awards of like celebrating the best ads from around the best creative work. And they're all sitting there like musicians are going, what does it mean that now maybe AIs can do this? So that was kind of fun. Elon Musk turned up like a supervillain and did a keynote in which he kind of sounded quite reasonable, disappointingly. Like a lot of people I knew were saying they wanted him to sound like a supervillain, but he kind of sounded fairly normal. And I'm not sure this does my credibility much good, but I went to Spotify had a villa party with John Legend playing his piano on top of a swimming pool. So that was my Cannes moments. And he's very good, but it was one of those things where like in that world, like that's the sort of thing you have to do. Like there were so many parties in Cannes. There are so many things to kind of court the advertising industry that you have to really go big. You have to get John Legend and a piano in a swimming pool to get them to come along. But obviously, when musicians who've been complaining about Spotify see those kind of pictures of like, oh, here we are in a villa, there's a kind of an optics which is less good for musicians than it is for the advertising industry. But yeah, that was quite fun.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, anyway, it's nice to be back in Glastonbury week. It's Glastonbury Festival this weekend. Have a lovely time if you're one of our listeners who are going. Have you been? I presume you've been to Glastonbury. Have you, Stuart, at some point?
I have. Yeah, my first two were the 96, 97, 97, the two muddiest years of the late 90s. So I went to the one where they closed a dance tent because of the pumping, and I saw Blur and I got stuck in the mud to Blur. Like, yeah. But since I've been to a couple of sunny years. But yeah, my break-in was just dreadful.
I mean, 97 was bad, but 98 actually was even worse, I think, because 97 it rained and it was poor. But 98 it never stopped raining. I don't think. I think I saw about 3 bands in 1998 because you couldn't move anywhere, and attempting to vox pop a crowd was virtually impossible. Although they did make us Radio 1 did make us go out with a microphone and ask people what sort of time they were having. Yeah.
It was that kind of year where you saw people, didn't you? Who like. People who've fallen over and obviously gone, you know what, sod it. And people who've gone full feral, covered in mud. And we were just like slogging around. But yeah, but on a beautiful year, it's a wonderful, like I went once and I completely, in a positive way, lost myself in the crowds, went wandering, spent a lot of time in bits of Glastonbury, nothing to do with the stages. And it's wonderful when it goes well.
I mean, there's one or two money angles around Glastonbury that we should possibly touch on. For starters, I mean, how is Glastonbury faring financially in what we know is a very difficult climate for festivals? I saw another news piece the other day which mentioned a quote from the Association of Independent Festivals. And this is harking back to a story which we did very early on in this series. But the current figure for the number of festivals that are either being cancelled or postponed so far this year is now up to 45 45 festivals off for a variety of reasons, which we mentioned a while back, including obviously there's the cost of living crisis, which is affecting how many people are buying tickets for some of the smaller festivals, and the rising production costs. They seem to really, they're really biting now. But Glastonbury, I mean, it's slightly hard to tell whether any of these challenges which are facing other festivals in general have affected Glastonbury, because it's quite hard to get to the bottom of Glastonbury's accounts. If you have a look on the Companies House website, there's two main Glastonbury businesses. There's Glastonbury Festivals Limited and Glastonbury Festival Events. And of those two, it's the latter, I think, that appears to be the one that runs the live events, including the festival. But they don't appear to have posted their full profit and loss accounts since the year ending March 2021, and that covered the periods which would have included the 2020 cancellation of the festival due to COVID. So that was the first of the COVID cancellations. But in that year, so their accounts ending March 2021, they made a loss of £3 million that year. The previous year, so that's year ending March 2020, so that would include the 2019 festival, their financial report for that year says Glastonbury Festival Events, despite having a turnover of £45 million, made a loss of 337,000 quid that year. It also reported a loss in 2019 because 2018 was a fallow year. But prior to that, and this is as far as we'll go back, but the accounts for 2018, so that would cover the 2017 festival, they made a profit after tax that year of about £1.5 million. But as for how they're faring now, I mean, we know because it was part of their impact report that the festival cost £68 million to stage last year. But the only other thing I know. So I think you can see how much the price of actually putting on a festival is. It's really starting to soar now. So this is everything that the AIF have been talking about, because some of the equipment hire is more expensive because some of it has to come in from Europe. Obviously, you've got to find people to staff the event. But the only thing we have got is Glastonbury Festival Events filed their balance sheet in March this year, and that states that their net current assets were just below £5.5 million. I mean, obviously, I should caveat all this by saying I'm not an accountant, although I did speak to an accountant about about the other company. So Glastonbury Festival, which I think is the nuts and bolts bit, that's got a net worth of £4.7 million, made up of fixed assets and some outstanding debts they're owed. So the fixed assets, I imagine, is the land and the machinery and all those other things, but there's some equity there. And I mean, you can go further, but even past those two companies, because there are two other businesses registered at Worthy Farm. One is Holy Cow, which was set up a few years back by Emily Evis and Nick Dewey. And there's also Manor Borders Limited, which Michael Evis is a director of and Emily's the secretary. And both of those have got a few bob on their balance sheets. But I mean, to be honest, I thought this will take me about 20 minutes to have a look through this. But I honestly ended up going down something of a Glastonbury, festival economic rabbit hole. Which coincidentally, the rabbit hole is the name of one of the stages they used to have at Glastonbury. And I'm sure, which is gone this year. That's one of the stages. They're taking a lot of stages out and putting new ones in over the last few years. But I don't think there's a rabbit hole this year. But anyway, that's part of them. I mean, you could probably. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than this, which a professional accountant might care to explore. But that's the money around the festival. Outside of it, you have the knock-on effect of the festival itself. So amongst the other economic factors we should mention, effect on local economy. As I say, they put out an impacts report, and I'll quote you from this. So it's research commissioned by Glastonbury last year suggested that the festival has a significant positive economic impact both nationally and in Somerset, generating £168 million of income for UK businesses, including £32 million for businesses based in Somerset. So you can see when they do have a fallow year, that takes a lot of money out of the local economy. But we should also mention, obviously, that Glastonbury gives a lot of money to their core charities, which last year, I think last year was more than they've ever given away before. I think usually it's around £2 million goes to charity. Last year, they're saying they gave £3.7 million to charity. Which is because they give so much money away. I think that's one of the it's one of the various reasons why there's so much goodwill, isn't there, for Glastonbury? I think, and
this is the thing. I think it's a thing about festivals, and I think we're talking obviously about the biggest, aren't we? The very biggest one we have, but every festival has that impact on local businesses, local people. And I think festivals can do a lot of positive things. They can choose to use local suppliers. They can get local food suppliers in. They can actually take an active role in benefiting the community around them. And so when we talk about festivals closing down and when the industry is talking to the government and saying, look, we need some support here, this is what we're talking about. It's not just that, tens of thousands of people can't go to a festival there because it's closed. It is about that wider impact and the good they do. So, so in a way, Glastonbury is writ large what every festival does wherever it's held, I suppose.
And I think because it's so famous and it's televised and it's such a there is a lot of respect for the festival and its history, I think. But I think that in turn is one of the reasons why Glastonbury, which people probably have seen the stories, but this is why Glastonbury pays or can afford to pay artists less than their going rates, less than what other festivals would have to pay for them. I mean, partly, as I say, because it's Glastonbury, and who doesn't want to play Glastonbury? And also, secondly, if you are on one of the major stages being filmed by the BBC, then the coverage you receive for playing the festival is sort of worth taking the financial hit for. I think that's what we find. Although this came up recently, didn't it? Do you see that story which appeared from our friend Nadine Shah, who posted that she wasn't appearing? Yeah, because and Nadine was saying that she wasn't going to do Glastonbury basically because she couldn't, from the fee they were offering, she couldn't cover the costs of her going and playing. And because the stage she was offered wasn't one of the ones being filmed for TV, she'd effectively just be going and playing a gig at a loss without any publicity, particularly to offset it. And I think
it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think some artists you can rock up and play, and in Glastonbury, people can rock up and play sort of 4 or 5 different stages at the kind of lower end, and you can. But I think if you're an artist if you've got a band, if you've got any kind of complicated band, if you've got different instruments or stuff that needs a little bit more thought, then the costs mount up, and like you say, suddenly you are doing something, and what is the benefit other than being there? It's difficult, I think, because Nadine Shah is a good example. I wouldn't want to see her at a gig where she's having to compromise and do it without certain band musicians or doing to kind of cut corners. You want to see her presenting her music in how she wants to. So it's difficult, I think.
And I think it works even right up to the top level as well, because if you're going to headline a festival, you are going to want to do something special, and to do something special that will cost money, because you're the band will be the ones paying for the pyros, and all the special effects will come out of the band's budget. But here again, even at Glastonbury, the headliners of the festival will be getting much less than they would at other festivals. I mean, Michael Eavis himself has said, I think the last time Coldplay played, they took 200 grand, I think, as their fee, which I mean, you could treble that, maybe. I mean, interestingly, I saw another story this week about how much festival headliners are being paid this year. I think it might have been in the Mirror, who were saying, top names now could command about £1 million for one gig. To do, I won't name which festivals, but if you're doing a big festival, £1 million is. It's apparently feasible. I spoke to somebody in the live music game this week who was saying that they had paid a band back in the noughties to do a festival, 2 festivals, and they got £1 million for doing the two gigs. So if that's back in the noughties, he was saying it is kind of feasible now. It's it's not impossible that headliners are getting a £1 million if you're the top of the range headliner who will sell a lot of tickets.
It's a good night's work, isn't it? I read a piece actually. I think it was on Sky, weirdly, a Sky News, breaking down festivals and like some of the deals, because you can do deals. You can have an exclusive deal where you're not going to play other festivals around there. Like there's all kind of negotiations around when you're agreeing to perform, where you can probably up the fee a bit if you say, right, we won't do other festivals nearby in this period and so on. So yeah. There's some, but it's weird, isn't it? 'Cause I suppose if you pay someone £1 million, does that mean you're having to kind of cut your budget elsewhere, lower down the stages or lower down the nights?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what he was saying. He made a couple of good points, actually, that you wouldn't be able to pay every headliner £1 million. You might have £1 million for your Saturday night headliner, but that would mean that you'd have to economise on your headliner budget for, say, the Friday and the Sunday. But also, and this is, I hadn't thought about this, but this makes absolute sense. And exactly what you're saying is that if you do spend all this money at the top, there's less money to go around. He estimated that it is entirely possible that for a 3-day event, the money going to the 3 headliners in total, what you're paying the 3 headlining artists, that could be as much as 50% of the entire festival budget. And I know all festivals are different, and there's no hard and fast rules. But for a big commercial festival, 50% of the budget on the headliners. But as I say, that's because they're the ones that sell the tickets, aren't they? Which, again, brings us back to Glastonbury and why this is different, because you can't, as an act, play hardball over your fee, because unlike other festivals where you as the band know the festival needs you to sell tickets, you can't do that with Glastonbury because all the tickets are sold out anyway.
It's true. It'll be very funny next year, though, if they get Taylor Swift for the Sunday night next year, and that means they have to have me headlining the main stage on the Friday.
Yeah,
I say that'd be funny. That'd be terrifying. That's like a terrible nightmare where you wake up at Glastonbury in front of a pyramid stage crowd with no musical ability at all.
Well, enjoy Glastonbury if you are going this year. Here's another festival-related story, which actually happened while we were away, but we should still mention this because we've covered it before. But the suspension of Barclaycard's sponsorship deal with Live Nation.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we were following this one. We were saying about artists were pulling out of festivals, and they wanted festivals to divest their sponsorship from Barclaycard, which was difficult because it was part of this bigger deal that Live Nation did last year. It was a 5-year sponsorship deal, so it wasn't that the Great Escape or Download or Latitude had done individual deals. It was part of a bigger agreement. But yeah, so it turned out Barclays and Live Nation both put statements out saying they'd agreed to suspend participation in the remaining Live Nation festivals in 2024. So that was Download, Latitude, and Isle of Wight. What it doesn't mean is that they've pulled out entirely or completely kind of torn up the deal. It's just this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key word, isn't it? Suspension. It's a suspension of the deal for this year. It's not the cancellation of the deal. That's how I read it.
It's true. And I was reading the quotes because there were quotes from Barclays, and they said, and they were quite, Barclays was like, we're spending this, but, and it was like the protested agenda is to have us debank defence companies, which is a sector we remain committed to as an essential part of keeping this country and our allies safe. They were quite punchy, Barclays, in their statement. They were saying, we're not going to, we are pulling out this year, but we're not pulling away from this, and we're not going to stop working. We're not going to stop providing our services to the defence companies, which was the big criticism, I think. They're working with these arms companies. And the organisation Bands Boycott Barclays, which have been leading this, they said they're going to carry on pressing. And they said, our demand to Barclays is simple. Divest from the genocide in terms of the people who are using those companies' arms, or face further boycotts. And they also brought up that claiming Barclays is Europe's primary funder of fossil fuels. So they're also kind of pushing on the idea of the climate angle. So in a way, this has kind of taken away the immediate difficulty for the festivals and the bookers there, in that bands don't have to play. But Live Nation has got a big decision to make about next year and the 2 years after that, which has been making me think. I mean, these kind of sponsorships with financial firms, this is quite common now, isn't it, in big festival land, that there's a lot of. And so are these events going to be sustainable without those sponsorship deals if they were to go away? And if not, why not? And what do they need to do? Because these are big festivals. The Latitude, Download, they're huge things. So what I don't know is how crucial was this kind of sponsorship deal to the financial health of those events? And if next year they go, actually, yeah, we can't bring Barclay Cup back in, who they get instead and how it works? It's quite a sort of slightly worrying moment, I think, for those festivals and people who love them, because there may be a shortfall, so they'll need to cover it. Which is that's not me criticising the campaign. It's more just the situation it's been put off rather than settled now.
Here's another ongoing story. Record companies versus AI startups, and quite a significant development in this week as the battle between the AI firms and the music industry has started to hot up and could end up in court, Stuart.
It could. It's like we're going back to the glory days of the late 90s where the RIAA, this US labels body, are suing people. Because they were famously one of the lead organizations suing file sharing companies like Napster back in the day, and also music fans at the time, which went less well for them. But yeah, so yesterday the RIAA announced on behalf of all three major labels and a bunch of their kind of subsidiaries, they're suing two companies, so Udio and Suno. I think both of whom we talked about. So Suno is a company that raised $125 million recently in funding. Udio launched recently. They're suing them for copyright infringement. And it kind of focuses on the training process. So they're saying these companies basically copied loads of commercial recorded music without permission, ingested it into their AIs, and their AIs are now producing outputs that you can see has been trained on works. And they're seeking up to $150,000 per work infringed, which, I mean, the way this case works is you tend to give a list and say, well, we've done these 141 works we think have been infringed, but it could be millions. So it could be an enormous blockbuster, and so what happened was this was announced yesterday, and the quotes are like, this is a straightforward case, copyright infringement on a massive scale. Then of the two companies, Udio hasn't said anything yet, as far as I know, when we're recording. But Suno has responded, and they've been quite punchy. So that their CEO put a statement out saying, our technology is transformative, designed to generate completely new outputs, not to memorize and regurgitate pre-existing content. And he said that we don't allow user prompts that reference specific artists. You can't go on Suno and say, make me a Drake track. It won't let you do that. And he also said, and this is where it gets quite fun, we would have been happy to explain this to the corporate record labels that filed this lawsuit. And in fact, we tried to do so, but instead of entertaining a good faith discussion, they reverted to their old lawyer-led playbook. So it's quite, on the nose, really. Which was, I think, is a deliberate reference back to, I think there is this folk memory amongst people of a certain age of the days when labels were suing file sharers. And the labels won. Like Napster, LimeWire, Pirate Bay, they all ended up being shut down. But it was quite a big public relations sort of thing for the music industry when they were seen to be suing fans. So in a way, he's drawing this reference saying, look, big bad labels again. But I'm not sure it's the best example because the labels did win last time. And this time they're not suing fans, they're suing the companies. So it's, but yeah, the other thing, I think we talked about this before, but these two companies, the other thing about them is they are really good in terms of the quality of their output. And that's because seemingly they may have trained on all the music, whereas some of their rivals have just trained on production music or whatever their kind of internal engineers could play in the studio when jamming.
Yeah. So, anything cheap, anything cheap or available. Yeah.
So they're much better than a lot of their rivals, and they've raised the most funding and they've got the most users. So for the music industry, the headache here was, what if the companies who are doing it the way we don't agree with run away with the market? And then they come back to us and they've got really big and powerful and we can't sort of. So that's why they're suing. I think it's they believe they're in the wrong, but also they're the ones who are seeming like they might run away with it. But these companies are arguing that they can do this, don't need permission. It's fair use, which is a very specific term in the US, meaning you can use copyrighted stuff to do things as long as it is transformative, the word the guy used deliberately, and you're making new things. So there's two sides who are both really confident they'll win this. The record industry is like, it's straight right copyright infringement, open and shut case, you've got no leg to stand on. And these AI companies are likely to say, this is fair use, we can do this, there's no grounds to sue us. So they'll either go to court and we'll find out who's right, or they'll settle it which is generally more likely, and figure out a deal.
Yeah, I mean, the other way of doing this is, I suppose, to actually, as I was saying, start some sort of dialogue, because also in AI news this week, wasn't there was a more positive story? It's Universal Music Group, haven't they announced that they are doing a deal with an AI company?
Yeah, and they've done a few actually. So the label's view is we are open for business. And so Universal have worked with a company called Endel, who do kind of AI-driven remixes. They're working with a company called Sound Labs, was one last week, which is basically a way of, we've talked about in the past, this thing in AI where people can create clones of artists' voices and you can make new music with them. So you could have a clone of, I don't know, Taylor Swift's voice. And if you do it without permission, that's bad. But Universal is working with a company that help you do it. Artists do it themselves. So an artist can go, you know what, I'm going to clone my own voice. I'm going to let people make music with it. I'm going to have artistic control over what they put out, and I'll get royalties. So there are deals to be done. And that is the music industry's point of view. They're saying, look, we want to license companies. We want to work with them. They don't need to do this without permission. They can come to us and we'll have a talk. And we talked about Sony Music sending a letter to loads of them saying that exactly that. Like, don't do this without permission. Come and negotiate. Without being a massive cynic, the key there will be what those deals look like and are they sustainable. If you, as a label, you could go in and say, we want 50% of your company and $10 million up front and a big share of the royalties. And it could be a deal that the AI company might say, well, we can't make a business work on that. So a lot will depend on what the deals look like, how they're structured. And to be honest, like, everyone's trying to figure this out. Like, if you do a deal with an AI company to let it train on all your music, if you're a Universal Music Group or an indie label, anyone, you're sort of saying, okay, pay us some money, we'll let you train on our stuff. But you don't really know what the stuff people create with that AI is going to do. Is it going to compete with your music? Is it going to sit somewhere else and not be a worry? So I don't know how. It's very hard to say, well, this is what we're going to charge you, because you don't know what the impact is going to be on your business of what people do with it. So it's one of those real grey areas where the music industry is saying you have to have deals, but I don't know if we really know what the deals look like yet. So it's going to be fascinating. But again, with this, I mean, we remember UMG and TikTok fell out. And at the beginning, they were both like, you're terrible. No, you're terrible. You're worse. And they eventually reached a deal because it seemed in both their interests. So it's still quite possible this will happen here. But it is a big moment because it is the two biggest, buzziest AI music services. And it's the music industry being very much, you are committing copyright infringement. We're going to sue you, and we're going to set a marker for everyone else to do things the right way. So we'll see how it goes.
Next, Warner Music Group, and now, if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, that's because they've spelt it incorrectly. Warner Music Group and Stinger, that's spelled Styngr, everybody. Warner's and Stinger, Stinger being the gaming arm of the recorded music industry, have partnered up. Can you explain Stinger and why this is important?
I can. I think you're right. I think people spell their names strangely. They can't complain if we get it wrong. But it'll be a fun correction next week if we say it was actually Styngr. Sorry for that. So Stinger is actually a startup. It's a music tech startup. And it helps labels and artists get their music into games and virtual worlds. So that's its kind of raison d'etre. Mm-hmm. And weirdly, its deal with Warner Music Group is about batteries. They're called batteries.
Right.
Not to say, but so this is about Roblox, which we talked about a couple of times before. So Roblox is a really popular online gaming platform. It's got like millions of games you can play. You can run around. It's very popular with kids, but it's kind of growing for older people too. And this is about, you can now, if you're in Roblox, you can buy these virtual batteries. I don't know why they're called that. And they let you listen to kind of radio style streams of music within Roblox. So you can buy a listening battery to listen by yourself, or you can get a party battery, and 4 people can sort of listen together to music. And Stinger is kind of curating these radio stations based on one of them. And they did a similar deal earlier this year with Universal Music Group. And that was called a boombox. And it was kind of like a virtual ghetto blaster type idea. But again, you put it on in the game, you can listen to music, and it has ads. And I think this is, I mean, to people who aren't into Roblox, this might all sound like kind of weird, strange, from the future babbling. But what I like about it is it feels like a take on well, when I grew up, probably the same for you, when we grew up, the way we would play music for friends in the spaces we hung out. So whether it's like your bedroom or your kitchen or even sitting in the park with an actual ghetto blaster, the idea of like playing music with friends, I've got this new album, come around, listen to it, we'll sit on the floor and look at the vinyl. That's kind of the what I grew up with. But young people today, a lot of them, the places they hang out are virtual. It's Roblox, it's Fortnite, it's other kind of games. And finding a way to put music in that is quite cool. I think it's the equivalent. It's like wherever you're hanging out, you can listen to music together. And sometimes people worry, I think, in the industry, like, well, kids play games a lot now. They watch streaming video. What if they don't care about music as much? And one answer to that is, well, take the music to where they are and what they're doing. So this is why I like this. It's like, okay, where are people hanging out virtually? Let's find a way to get music in there and make sure royalties are paid. So it's quite a cool idea.
And finally, for this episode, now, you may have read about this in the press. Stuart's been looking forward to doing this story for days now. Jay Aston from Bucks Fizz is not happy about streaming royalties.
She's not. Okay, she's been making her mind up.
Oh.
she thinks...
Keep the powder dry.
I'm just getting started. She thinks streaming is a land of make-believe. She wants a bigger piece of the action. Her band used to make lots of money from recordings, but now those days are gone. Oh. Yeah, that's about all I had to find.
Is that all?
That's all of them I've done. I promise. No more.
All right.
No, yeah. So look, we talked recently. My first gig was Bucks Fizz. I loved Bucks Fizz when I was a kid. So long-held memories. But yeah, Jay Aston is one of the founder members, and she said in an interview, streaming is kind of terrible. We don't get any money from it. To make a few £1,000s, you've got to have 1 million streams on Spotify. And that's correct. Like, that's on the money. Like, there was a streaming inquiry here in the UK, and major labels said, yeah, about 5,000 quid for 1 million streams. And then the artist gets their share of that, which may be a couple of grand. And she said, there's artists that just Taylor Swift, and then there's poor artists who aren't even making enough for a cup of tea. So that's the Bucks Fizz Taylor Swift comparison, which no one saw coming. I looked it up though. They've got we need to go. I'm afraid we need to go very deep on Bucks Fizz lore now.
Okay.
Let me explain to you. So Bucks Fizz, the original band, have 247,000 monthly listens on Spotify. So they've maybe got up to 800,000 across all services. Making Your Mind Up's the most popular track, the Eurovision winner, but that's only got just over 30 million streams on Spotify. She's right. It's not big money. The funny thing is they re-recorded it in 2013. So they're kind of, again, like Taylor Swift. They've re-recorded one of their biggest hits. But the other thing is, the Bucks Fizz, if anyone else has followed this story, there was a documentary a few years ago, which was amazing. There's 2 Bucks Fizzes now. There's one with 3 of the founder members called The Fizz, because they don't have the trademark.
Right.
And the guy who owns the trademark has Bucks Fizz. And even on his website, it says, the current lineup that's featured here is the only group authorized to perform as Bucks Fizz. So whichever version of the band you talk about, live is how they make their money now. And they're still playing live, both these bands. But they're kind of divided. Like, if you're going to go and see Bucks Fizz, you're probably not going to see both of them. Even I'm not going to go and see both of them. You have to choose. So they're not getting much streaming money. And when they play live, you either get the official name, but only one original member, or the unofficial name. And, it's a bit... But they probably get a decent boost from Eurovision, I would think. Like, every year when Eurovision comes around, Making Your Mind Up gets played on radio and TV. So there's money there. But yeah.
I mean, do you think that? I think we mentioned this before, but is it? I mean, the streaming revolution has hit heritage artists harder in a way. I think because, well, at least psychologically, because they're the artists who would have been paid in the old-fashioned model for singles and albums, and had come to expect a certain amount of revenue. Particularly when there's a reissue of part of their back catalogue, but music coming out on physical formats, and they can sort of trust and they know and they understand if they put out a record, they'll probably get X amount of money back. But now instead of a royalty check coming in for the latest Bucks Fizz Best Of album, they just get a dribble of streaming royalties, and this has got to be. It's got to be a culture shock for the old guard, isn't it?
Well, also, yeah, and also when you have a heritage artist like that. You can do stuff like there's a whole art and science of marketing catalog, and so someone at a label could sit down and go, right, we're going to make Bucks Fizz's catalog stream double, triple the amount it is at the moment, and that's about marketing. It's about connecting with the fans who loved you back in the day. It's about taking it to life. And one of the challenges there is if the original band members aren't together and if they've fallen out, which I think may be the case here, then that becomes more difficult because you've got to get them to agree on stuff like marketing and reissues and so on. So, I'd love to see someone take that by the scruff and say, right, we're gonna get Bucks Fizz triple the streams, but it's difficult. And I think for a lot of heritage artists, if you haven't got someone at a label or working your catalogue, or if you haven't got the rights back and your team are doing it, then it can be a dribble because no one is going in there and saying Spotify, hey, put this Bucks Fizz track on a playlist, or building your main list and telling fans, hey, go and stream this album, we're reissuing it. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do. But I first, there is no stuff, and this is why I don't want to back you into a corner of agreeing with me about a band you don't like at all. But like everything I've liked in music jumped from being 5, 6 and thinking, I love Bucks Fizz, I love pop music. Like the bands of that era for me, that's what was my pathway. So I would like them to be making money. I'd like them to be doing well because, I owe them. Everything, no matter how far it is from Bucks Fizz now, I owe to that original moment of being a little kid going, I love this song. So, I hope they survive and do well.
I mean, it does sound like you're the man for the job, doesn't it? It does sound like you could take this in hand, marketing Bucks Fizz. You could bring back the sale of Bucks Fizz pillows. You could get on top of the merchandise. I mean, that'll make no sense to anyone who hasn't listened to previous episodes, but the Bucks Fizz pillow is already folklore in Price of Music.
It's the thing is, there's so much nostalgia, and like you have all those Butlins gigs now for Britpop. We've like every scene and era reaches its Butlins stage where you can get a bunch of the bands back together to play Butlins and do a weekender. You have done DJing at those things, haven't you? Like it's a big circuit now of nostalgia. So there is money there.
Yeah.
But I don't know what Bucks Fizz, like Bucks Fizz probably could do Eurovision things, and that's an audience and circuit. But I don't know what they fit into otherwise. It's not like a scene like Britpop, is it? It's like a early 80s, bit like ABBA, British pop bands. There's not a Butlins gig in it, but there's...
Yeah, I don't know. I'm already thinking to myself, am I putting too much thought into this? Too much.
I've made that happen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I might come back to it later in the day. We have to go. That'll be it for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you have enjoyed the show, please do subscribe in your podcast app and give us a review and a rating if you get the chance. It helps us to find new followers and spread the word. Also, if you like what we're trying to achieve and you'd like to support the show, you can become a Price of Music fan or super fan for as little as £2 a month. You'll find all the details at patreon.com/thepriceofmusic. And if you have a question you'd like us to try and answer for you, email us at thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. We have another listener questions special coming up later this week. Till then, thanks again, everybody. Take care.